So we're here today to continue from yesterday. And I think actually Wolfgang was the one who first started this whole process months ago when he asked if we could do the Bodhisattva vows. So this is the start of that. So Wolfgang asked, but then he forgot to come yesterday. So are you here today, Wolfgang?
Yes.
He's here? I can't see him. Anyway, he was the one who started.
Yes, hello.
Thank you, Wolfgang, for requesting. And I'm sorry you missed yesterday.
There he is.
There you go. Hi. So what we did yesterday, was we had a bit of preparation, a bit of introduction. Then we took took refuge and took lay vows. And then we did the preparation, the 2 days of His Holiness. And always this first day with His Holiness, it's preparation. So in the end, he gave us the lay vows as well as His Holiness gave us the Bodhisattva vows. But it's very brief when you do it within an empowerment. So I thought today, as I mentioned yesterday briefly, we will go anyway, and that'll be for Wolfgang's advantage. We will go through the Bodhisattva vows. And so if you've taken yesterday, which you all did, you can think of it as renewing it, because it goes into more detail. It's from a ceremony that His Holiness gave. And when you give it in isolation as just a Bodhisattva vow ceremony, it takes longer, it's more extensive, and it's much more moving in a way. But it's very nice, it's more detailed. So we'll repeat that, we'll do that this morning. And it's got a bit more detail in it. So just think of it as getting the blessing, of my words, but getting directly a transcript of a ceremony His Holiness gave one time years ago. So we'll do that. And so those of you online who weren't here yesterday, who do want to take the Bodhisattva vows, this is your opportunity. And then we will do the empowerment with His Holiness. There's probably a couple of hours altogether. So the preparation basically for, say, for example, Wolfgang, who missed yesterday, would be anyway taking refuge, the lay vows and the Bodhisattva vows. And that's, in a sense, that is the preparation. So he's not missing anything in that. You can still, today, you can take the empowerment. Or any one of you can simply take it as a blessing, which means you don't take it as an empowerment, which means you don't need to take any vows. So if you've taken refuge, lay vows, Bodhisattva vows, then you can take the empowerment. If you haven't, or even if you have, you don't have to take the empowerment. You simply sit there and take it as a blessing, feel His Holiness's presence and His blessing. And there's no need to have the vows if that's the case. Because, and this is what I want to talk about this morning, a little bit more of the preliminary practices or the prerequisites for a person entering into the Vajrayana. And this is an empowerment by definition, it is the Vajrayana. So I want to talk a bit about that this morning, or this afternoon, or this evening, depending where you are, middle of the night in America, about that first. So let's we're sitting here together all over the world, as well as in this room in Noble Park in Melbourne with the racing cars behind. You can't hear them, but we can hear them. What's it called, that place? Sandown is a famous place. What kind of cars?
I don't know.
It's not the fancy $10 million, $20 million cars.
No, I don't know. They're probably Porsches.
They're probably Porsches, or they're fancy cars just down the road. You can hear them here. But also this town, this suburb of Melbourne is famous for where they bury people, where you get burned and get buried, the dead people. What's it called, that place? Springvale Crematorium is famous.
They changed the name.
To what?
To Springvale Botanical Gardens.
It's now called the Springvale Botanical Gardens. You still get burned there. You still get burned and buried. So it's just more posh. Probably they've got a cafe. Everywhere in the world has a cafe now. They do have a cafe.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we've been there. We went there.
Yeah, Death Cafe.
So you've got to monetize even a crematorium, calling it a botanical garden. That's very nice, isn't it?
It used to be called the Necropolis.
Necropolis it was called once.
They didn't think it was welcoming enough.
It's not welcoming enough because we don't like to think about death. So who wants to go to a necropolis? But you want to go to a botanical garden and have a coffee before you bury your loved ones.
Yes.
I think my darling sister Jan got burned there.
Oh.
And we didn't go because they didn't care about that. Then we had a party together. And I think this is my sister's because she's a fanatical Sydney Swans football barracker, as we call it in Australia. You barrack for a football team. And she was a fanatic Sydney Swans. And my sisters decided to have her burned in her Sydney Swans Guernsey. And when I was at the hospital trying to sing mantras in my sister's ear without being too much of a kind of religious fanatic, all my other sisters and my brother were weeping and singing the Sydney Swans football team song. Well, I whispered on Mani Padme Hung in her ear. I hope she heard it. So anyway, there we go. So we're going to first do a little requesting, which is meaning we're going to offer to the Buddha mandala, which means a representation of all the objects of the universe. So just think of all the marvelous things in the world, pile them all up and offer to the Buddha. And we're also going, as a request for this ceremony, these teachings. And then second, we're going to offer representations of enlightened body, speech, and mind as a sort of an auspicious sign for us to achieve these. It's got great meaning. So offering a statue, a text, and a stupa representing enlightened body, speech, and mind. So we'll do that first. So someone can sing the prayer first and someone can do it. Okay. So all of you imagine, we don't have the prayer online, do we? On the screen, do we? So people can sing the prayer. The mandala, there's the simple mandala prayer offer. Then you can all, if you know it by heart or you watch it on, here it goes. There we go. So we're going to sing that in Tibetan, and then we might do the second one as well. Why not? The first one is offering all the marvelous things of the universe, piling them all up, offering to the Buddha as a request for this. Second is offering, and Lama Yeshe would always get us to do this, it's called the inner offering. And as you can see, the words, I offer the objects of my attachment, my anger, my ignorance, all my friends, my enemies, the strangers, all my body, all my resources, all my things, all the objects of your senses. So without any sense of loss, I offer these. Please accept them well and bless me to be spontaneously freed from the three poisons. So it's a nice prayer to do. We'll do both of those. You sing it.
Sajivoki Jungshin Meto Tramri Radhi Nijen Genpati Sangye
Now think of all your delusions, all your rubbish, and offer all to the Buddha. Buddha can handle it. Say it in English.
The objects of my attachment, anger, ignorance, friends, enemies, strangers, body, and resources. Without any sense of loss, I offer them. Please accept them well and bless me to be spontaneously freed from the three poisons.
The Buddha happily accepts our offering. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niyatayami. And I think, also that, okay, good. So that's it. So the next little prayer, the refuge, please. Refuge prayer. Okay. Push the cushions down. Let us sit on here. More close to the cushion. That's it. Thank you. Okay, ready? We'll do this one. No, that's the wrong one. It says Jinsog. We need to have Chunyen. Oh. But it'll do. Okay, don't worry. At the third line, you see Jinsog, which means by the virtuous karma of generosity and the other perfections. But we're saying instead Chunyen, which means by the merit of listening to the teachings. That's the words Chunyen instead. Okay. So what we're saying, I'll say it first in English a little bit longer so we understand what we're saying. So we're saying, we're aspiring, we're saying, until we're enlightened, we're going to rely upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, which we expressed yesterday. And then by the virtuous karmic seeds that I plant in my mind by listening to these teachings, as a result of these seeds, may they ripen as my Buddhahood, no matter how long it takes. So then I'm qualified to benefit all suffering sentient beings. Thinking like that. Sangye charan soke chognam la jangcho baju dagni kyap suchi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye dropa shok sangye charan soke chognam la jangcho baju dagni kyap suchi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye dropa shok. Okay, so, classically, and I didn't do it and I should do it and I now will do it, before we have an empowerment, before we even enter into any discussion about Vajrayana, Tantra, the most advanced level of the teachings, I always use the analogy, we take the Lam Rim, I've got the low scope, middle scope, great scope, and then you got Tantra. Well, I like junior school, high school, university, and university level. So this is Tantra's university level. So the prerequisites the way Lama Tsongkhapa presents, the prerequisites for entering into any level of so-called Tantra are initially is those early stages of practice. But the way he presents it is slightly different. He presents it as the three principal aspects of the path. So it's another way of framing, another way of labeling those levels of practice in the Lam Rim. The first one, which is the first and second scopes, basically, or the wisdom wing, is all the nuts and bolts of working on the abiding by the laws of karma. Why? Because you don't want future suffering, harnessing the energy of your body and speech, and then harnessing the energy of your, and then your mind, the second scope. All of that's the wisdom wing. All of that is what the first of these three principles of the path. What you'd accomplish from that level of practice is what they call renunciation. So we have very vague ideas of what we think renunciation means. Well, it means giving up something. Well, the cliched, mistaken way we hear it is, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, when we hear that Buddha says, sorry guys, you got to give up attachment. Oh, I've got to give up my heart. I've got to give up my happiness. Because we haven't looked in precisely enough to the teachings and the meaning. No, you're giving up suffering and its causes. I mean, good Lord, who doesn't want that? So the first stages of practice are the methods for accomplishing that. But a nice way to an important thing to remember, if you're giving up suffering, don't just think you're ending up with something, not having something, but you're gaining something with, guess what? It's called happiness. So it's another way of saying is the first stages of practice, you're giving up suffering is gaining happiness. Because if you've given up the causes of suffering, then obviously this is the method, the beginning stages of developing happiness. That sounds more exciting to us because we want that. So if you're giving up the causes of suffering and its cause, you have to know what the causes are. So we talked about that yesterday. Buddha's analysis would say that the things we think and do and say in the mind that are driven by neuroses, they're the cause of suffering. Who's suffering? My suffering. So the methodology, the very first level of giving up future suffering is give up the causes. The very first level, junior school, entry level, grade 1, first scope, is give up harming others. You give up killing, you give up stealing, you give up lying, the grosser levels of negative actions, the things that harm others. So at least you harness your verbal and physical energy and don't kill and don't steal and don't jump on the wrong partner and don't lie. There are 7 little things. Okay, we take the vows where it's 5 things, but here there's the general instructions that Buddha gives. Then you get to the next level of practice and you begin to give up even the delusions themselves, which drive our actions of body and speech. So it's very practical. But when we hear it in terms of normal religion, giving up something sounds like someone's jumping on top of you and saying you're naughty and you mustn't do this, and if you do it, you get punished. And this is just simply infantile. Like we said yesterday, one of the key things about being a Buddhist is you recognize and you begin to take as you're on board this view that we are our own boss. We create our own happiness and we create our own suffering. We don't need a creator. We do fine creating our own mess, and we can do fine creating our own joy and happiness. This is what Buddha is saying. So it's very encouraging to hear that we're in charge instead of being a victim. Victims blame everybody else. This is how we think. No one taught us. I didn't ask to get born. It's not my fault, we say. Buddha says, sorry guys, yes, your happiness is your fault. You created it. Or your experiences, they're the fruit of what you have done. So it demands we are accountable. So the first level of this first of the 3 is that you recognize the causes of suffering. You are revolted by the thought of future suffering. And why? Because you know you don't like it now. So you stop creating the causes. And the causes happen to be the grosser level, harming others, because they ripen as your suffering. So you give that up. Already you're a marvelous person. Already you're more subdued just by controlling your body and speech. And then you take these layperson's vows, which are all about merely behavior. They don't discuss the mind. Then you get to the root of it, where you get into the delusions, you look into the 3 poisons, and you start to harness the energy of your attachment and aversion. The 2 main ones, effectively attachment is the main one in this daily life. It's rooted, of course, in the root delusion, which we look into when we start to think about emptiness. But as the 4 Noble Truths are, and Buddha's telling us, attachment is the main cause of suffering. This universe is a product of attachment. This body of the 5 senses is a product of our past attachment. We created it in an evolutionary sense. So we start to really become Buddhists when we start to work on our mind. So this is what this brings then, your joy, your contentment, your clarity, your discipline. You become a more balanced, stable, content, fulfilled human being when you give up deluded actions of body, speech, and mind. You're the recipient of this. You're the beneficiary of this. This is the first of the three principal aspects of the path, the first of the three prerequisites to enter into, you know, the highest, the most advanced level, postgraduate. Then you move to the compassion wing. That's the wisdom wing. And if you graduated there, you're on the Theravadan path, you would then add to your practice the development of a single point of concentration. And then on the basis of this, you would realize emptiness and cut the very root of all suffering. And eventually in one life or other, you would achieve your own nirvana, your own cessation of suffering and its causes. And you're out of here, baby, and you won't come back. But if you're on the Mahayana path, you will then continue to come back, even if you don't need to, because you want to benefit others as well. So you add the compassion wing to the mix. You now proceed to cultivate bodhicitta, this outrageous paradigm shift in the mind that in normal psychological and neuroscientific terms is a bizarre thing, where you give up utterly any neurotic conventional thought of an ordinary eye's needs, because you're now fulfilled, blissful, amazing being, and you've made this paradigm shift in your mind where now only others arise in your mind, only others are your concern. We don't have a way of seeing that in our culture. It just sounds too weird. It sounds like mental illness. So the first level of vows that we talked about are the pratimoksha vows, the vows of individual liberation, which we discussed are the wisdom wing, which enable you to get out of suffering. This next lot, still vows, still about behavior, still don't do this and don't do that. But then these are in reference to not just not harming others, but even beginning now to expand ourselves to even find a way to benefit others. More profound, more amazing, more outrageous, more shocking, and more sophisticated, more wise, necessarily. The first level is just don't. No wriggle room. You just control yourself. You don't kill, you don't steal, you don't lie. And then you start to realize you don't eat too many bits of cake and you don't, buy too many things, because you learn to harness the energy of attachment and all its and the other delusions. So you are the beneficiary of this level of practice, not you're a naughty person, you're not allowed to have happiness. It's the contrary. This is the method for getting happy. Now we go to the next level of vows, 3 sets of vows. This level of vows, outrageous. Still about don't this and don't that. Still about not harming others, but they're more expansive, because the first lot, there is motivation for what we do, but that's not the criterion in the first level. You just don't do it. You don't kill, you don't steal, you don't this. You do your best, harness your energy. This one, what determines your breaking a vow in this one, what determines you're breaking a vow in the first lot is just by doing it. What determines you break a vow in this next lot, the Bodhisattva vows, is the motivation for why you do it. This is more wise. It demands more awareness and more consciousness, more wisdom. So there are 18, as the Thomas mentioned yesterday, 18 root vows, and then 46 secondary vows. And all the secondary vows are divided into various groupings of vows related to the 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva. So the first lot of a few of them, like the first 7 or something, help you develop generosity. The next lot help you develop another level of morality and ethics, a second of the 6 perfections. The third lot help you develop patience. The fourth lot help you develop enthusiasm. The 5th lot help you develop concentration. The 6th lot help you realize emptiness. So they're related to these 6 perfections, to the Bodhisattva's practice. So as you can hear yesterday, His Holiness didn't mention any of the vows as such. When we took the vows, we did this short prayer and we recited it 3 times. And that's the prayer anyway, when you have taken the vows, that is one of your commitments to say every day, morning and night, because it purifies, as His Holiness said, it purifies your broken vows and it strengthens your kept vows. It's a marvelous thing. In those documents I've sent you all, you need to study all of this. This is the content, of what you're doing. So you need to know what the vows are, because if you don't know what a vow is, if you don't know what you've decided not to do, how do you know when you do it if you've broken it? So if you don't know that you're not supposed to, go more than 70 kilometers an hour, how do you know when you've broken it? You don't. You have to know them. It's very logical. So you can just read the vows, and there are 2 commentaries in that text, some from Lama Zopa and Kirti Sentam Rinpoche, and then some from Alex Berzin, the American scholar. They're extremely helpful to understand. And Alex lists them all clearly in terms of which delusion is the determining factor for breaking them. So it's very clear. If you don't know that, how do you know? So So these vows are more expansive too, because because they're more advanced and therefore the benefit of others. You can break one of it. There is a vow that allows you to break an earlier vow if it is for the benefit of others. So you can't play with that. We can be so arrogant, oh, it's for your benefit, punch, no, mind your own business, just don't punch. So to really do something skillfully, with consciousness and awareness, with a pure motivation that would harm another, this sounds shocking, and so we don't understand this component of the Bodhisattva path. We don't understand the Bodhisattva path at all, In fact, we don't even like to think that, yourself, yeah, you're allowed to do something mean, it's for your benefit. But if somebody dare do something to us, maybe based on a pure motivation for our benefit, we don't want to know about that. No, they're just evil people. We don't like to think that. We don't like to think that's possible even, We just like to think a person's bad and they did a bad thing. So we really got to understand this level of the Bodhisattva path. It's quite shocking in normal terms, So I used the example yesterday, or the radical example of one of the previous lives of the Buddha. They always use this as an example of his doing a so-called negative action of killing somebody, that not only was there no negativity when he did the action because of the powerful motivation, but it actually enhanced, it hastened his Buddhahood. This is hard to understand. We need to think about it carefully. That means we need to understand the Buddhist model of the mind. That means we need to understand the distinction between a delusion and a virtue, which is not how we talk in modern psychology. It just sounds like judgment and religion. If we don't get this component about Buddhist psychology, we don't understand the Mahayana path. We don't understand Buddhism at all, actually. Because Buddha's view of the mind is so unique, so precise, so clear. We all know the words attachment, love, compassion, but we don't have Buddha's analysis. If we don't get Buddha's analysis, we don't understand the Buddha's teachings. This is very clear. Therefore, we cannot possibly understand how it is possible that a person with a pure motivation can actually harm somebody. To do an action that would normally be called a negative action. It's hard for us to understand that. We don't like to think about it. It's too much for our poor minds. And that's based on the possibility within the Buddhist model of the mind of ridding the mind of the delusions. Like I said yesterday, the very word Buddha, maybe I didn't say it here, I said it somewhere else. I forget. I did, okay. So the first syllable, Buddha, implies the eradication from your mind of all neuroses, ego grasping, attachment, aversion, the three poisons, and all the other 83,997 of them. That are all branches of these three roots. Buddha has found from his own direct experience that is possible. This is the job he has done, and he presents his methodology for our doing it, which is the wisdom wing. Then the second one, Da, that implies the development to perfection of everything else in the mind, all the virtues. We don't talk like this in our modern psychology. But this is Buddha's view, and you've got to understand it. I'm not asking you to like it. If you commit to being a Buddhist, you'd better, otherwise you're in trouble. I'm a Buddhist, but I prefer Jung. It's like saying I'm a tennis player, but I prefer football. You're schizophrenic, okay? Make your mind up. It's not being fundamentalist, just being clear. You've got to know what you want. So Buddha, the utter eradication of all the delusions and the development to perfection of all the goodness. These words are phenomenally simple, but intellectually insane for us. We can't get our head around it. We might hear it 1,000 times. We never join the dots, That means Buddha's telling us you can get rid utterly of all the misconception of a neurotic self, the attachment, this demented vampire inside us that desperately only wants what I want. Every millisecond, it drives every sentient being. And then has a panic attack, which is called aversion or anger, when it doesn't get what it wants. This is what drives all sentient beings. And the degree to which these run rampant is the degree to which you suffer and cause others suffering. The degree to which you have access to any of your virtue is the degree to which they are mitigated. We have to learn to distinguish between them, because the entire job from this moment to Buddhahood is to distinguish between the delusions and the virtues. That's when you start to be a Buddhist, when you start to do that job. So if you can't identify anger and distinguish it from passion, if you can't identify attachment and distinguish it from love, you're in serious trouble. You'll just chuck the baby out with the bathwater. It's like you can't tell the difference between a herb and a weed, and you pull a lot out. You're a maniac. You have to have wisdom, distinguish between a weed and a herb. It's not easy. I was at a teacher center one time with my nephew, who's a horticulturist. Yeah, he knows all the plants. He knows all the things that grow, you know. And, you know, if you've been up to a teacher, it's kind of boring and dry. Well, it depends if you like boring, dry bush. It's okay. I mean, it's nice. It's flat and dry. And the things look brushy and kind of harsh, doesn't it? And I mean, my nephew, Justin, he was delighted. He's, oh, look at that little red thing. And look at that little leaf over there. Oh, you can eat this one. He was in heaven because he could distinguish, because he learned it. He had the wisdom of, he had Buddha's botany. He knew how to distinguish between a herb and a weed and a flower, and a good thing and a bad thing. I just saw vague green stuff. I had no way of distinguishing. So that's how our mind is for most of us. It's just vague emotional feelings. We have no way of distinguishing, you know. So you have to develop incredible clarity. First, by learning, you can't just look in the mind and go, there's a weed and there's a herb. You don't just look at a garden. You can look at a garden for 40 million years, but you'll never learn to know a weed from a herb if you don't learn botany. So you can look at your own mind and be so mindful. We love mindfulness. You can be mindful till the cows come home. You can be so mindful that you can even, let's say you're being mindful of your garden. You can even draw a perfect garden from memory because you've been so mindful of it. But you're an idiot if you don't know how to distinguish a flower from a weed. You're just foolish. You memorize it, but you're an idiot, just nihilistic. So if you just look at your mind every day and don't know how to distinguish between a delusion and a virtue, you're deluded. You're insane. You'll be very mindful, but of what? It's not a proper use of that, you know. You have to imbue the mindfulness with intelligence. Aha, there's a weed and there's a herb. You will only know that if you learn the Buddha's model, because Buddhism is not Jung, it's not Freud, it's not those other ones. I'm not being fundamentalist, it's just different. Then you're hands-on doing the work. Then you can become a really good gardener. Get rid of the weeds and grow the flowers. That's the wisdom wing. So now, once you've done that job down, you now can add this wish to benefit others. And because you know your own mind so well, and you see others, and now you're moving, you're kind of learning now to break down the barrier between self and other, wanting to help others, become conscious of their needs, what they want, what is best for them. So Tara might call me up, Rabin, would you like to come for a meal? And I'm sitting there, like I said yesterday, just kind of lazy and relaxed with my feet up. Oh, Tara, thank you, darling, another day. I broke a vow. First, I'm lying, so I could go. Second, I didn't give her the opportunity of creating the merit of offering me a meal. So we only ever follow what we want. Like, let's say you're a vegetarian or a vegan or something, or a gluten-free or whatever the labels that we have now. It's normal. It sounds shocking to say this, but let's say, you know, Amy passes me the bread. Oh, no, I don't eat bread. How rude of me. I just broke a vow. It's prevented her from creating the merit of offering me bread. Who says I have to eat it? Thank you, Amy. What a kind gift. Put it by the table. Take a crumb. No one says you have to eat it. So it's thinking of what's best for the other person. And it's a powerful one. Instead of only what I want. We make it virtuous. Well, I don't eat meat. I don't do this. I don't do that. It's me. Like I told you yesterday, the story. One Lama went to have a meal. The person cooked meat. The attendant said, I don't eat meat. The Lama said to the attendant, you eat that meat. Someone offered it to you. Okay, you're going to vomit and die. Maybe you think twice. It's a whole different way of seeing things. You're looking at needs of others. Right now, with our attachment, we're looking at everybody else in terms of our needs. And we're craving for them to love us. So we always act according to what we think, that if we do this, they will like me back. We don't think we think this way, but that's attachment to reputation. It's the deepest attachment of all. It drives everybody from the time we're born. It's so primordial. But here, we're learning to see what's best for the other person. You're not looking like a holy saint. Oh, yes, I'll take the bread for your sake, Amy. I don't eat bread, but I'll accept your gift. No. Thank you, Amy. How kind you are. Thank you, Tara. I'd love to go for a meal. Very different approach. You have to be conscious, you know. So to the level, so that's always that story I told of the Buddha, one of his past lives. You have to take the view here that he has already got renunciation, already completely subdued his body, speech, and mind, already realized emptiness, already got clairvoyance, already got incredible levels of his bodhicitta. You've got to take that as a given here on his path to Buddhahood, you know, already outrageously advanced. And such levels of compassion that it's very hard to comprehend these levels of compassion. when I hear the holy beings, like, especially Lama Rinpoche, who seems to be so radical in his expression of it, you know, he doesn't say it, he's got it. When you hear how he behaves in the face of suffering, and you look at any of the holy beings, it's hard to imagine that level of compassion can be gained, you know. We can only imagine our level of compassion, which of course is polluted by our hunger and our needs and our misery and our depression and our attachment and aversion. We can't imagine it not being polluted by delusions, you know. That's why it's so important to hear the stories of the holy beings. Hear logically too how it's possible by studying Buddhist psychology. That story, this high being and one of past lives. So this clairvoyance one, just by the way, you know, the amazing genius Indians, well before the Buddha, as Dalai Lama says, these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago were the ones who began the investigation to the nature of self. They cultivated this extraordinary skill called single point of concentration, called samadhi, called the technique shamatha. Ingenious, astonishing, unbelievable, brilliant psychological skill 3,000 years ago. They're the ones who began the investigation to the nature of self. Not what we think, we white people, was Freud 100 years ago. He's the smarty pants one. I'm sorry. 3,000 years ago. It's how, even now, most modern psychologists and thinkers and neuroscientists kind of poo-hoo that, you know. No, we've got the truth. So clairvoyance is a natural quality that you will accomplish as you go beyond the grosser levels of conceptuality and sensory consciousness, which are all we posit in neuroscience. We only posit the grosser levels of conceptuality and sensory, which are the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg of our capacity for cognition, for the mind. These amazing genius Indians, and this technique is intact for 3,000 years, still being practiced all over the world. That enables you to completely control, subdue the grosser level, to plumb the depths of the mind at this subtler level, to awaken our awareness at a subtle level. Don't think of it as mystical. This is psychology. And one of the natural consequences of this, of accessing your subtle level of consciousness, which is necessarily capable of cognizing subtler phenomena, such as the past, the future, and the minds of others. And the Buddha would say we can't begin to really benefit sentient beings if we've accomplished this. So there's one example. Forget Buddha, the story about the Buddha. Lama Yeshe at Kopan Monastery, our friend Harry, who's a meditator himself, back in the late 70s probably. He was trying to help one of the Sherpa monks there. I tell this story often. He was trying to help one of the Sherpa monks who was very sick, and he'd found a doctor to help him. And he told Lama Yeshe in passing, we found a doctor. And Lama just said to Harry, it's okay, he doesn't need a doctor. So Harry, trusting Lama, because he's his teacher, he has to trust his wisdom, he's okay, he didn't get the doctor. So he observed the monk got sicker and sicker, and eventually the monk went up to the mountains to his Sherpa family, and he died. Now that sounds like Lama Yeshe was beyond cruel, uncaring. I remember reading in America, an Australian story about the family. Whole family's been accused of murder because they didn't bring a doctor. It's in Australia. It's one of these, like a family that don't accept regular medicine, right? So they've all been accused of murder because they didn't get a doctor for this child. Well, Lama Yeshe would have been accused of murder too, but he didn't get a doctor. So what's going on? So Lama Lundrup, the abbot at Kopan, said to Harry, well, of course, Lama's clairvoyant. Lama's clairvoyant is a natural consequence of getting single point of concentration. Buddha says we've had it in countless lifetimes. We just didn't use it to realize emptiness. That's all. So we fell down the mountain again. Got clairvoyance, goes without saying, got bodhicitta, and got realization of emptiness, the three principal aspects of the path, achieve them, accomplish them. So there's astonishing wisdom that enables him to then do what is best for that person. So he can see clearly, Lama Lundrup said, that if he'd got the doctor, he would have healed the illness, and his life would have been fine. But Lama could see with his clairvoyance, you have to take this as a hypothesis here, that the karma that he created in whatever life it was, 42 lives ago, that was the cause of this suffering in this life, he would not have finished the karma. He'd have a fine life, and then his next life would have even been worse. Whereas having the sickness and even dying, and apparently he died very well, a very good death, he purified all the negative karma, next life fantastic. Now, who's got that kind of wisdom? We don't even posit that kind. We have some level of, future things, like your mother can be disciplining you, go to your room, I've told you 4 times, no more chocolate, and you think mummy's the worst person in the world, but she's been kind to you. She's got tough love. That's this level of tough love, at a much more radical level, because it involves clairvoyance and future lives. We don't think like that, do we? So Lama Yeshe, on his face of it, looked like doing a heavy never thing, not caring about the student, allowing him to die. No, his wisdom enabled him to see clearly the cause, and his enormous compassion enabled, advised what the best thing to do. That's intense. We've got to understand that that's a possibility. We don't like to hear that's a possibility, because we just believe in what we see. Our views are very limited. So unless we study the Buddhist teachings, the Bodhisattva teachings, this is hard to hear. We've got to know this is possible. And you won't know that if you don't study the mind. So the Bodhisattva vows are more advanced. They're totally based on what's best for the other person. What's best for the other person. And you cannot play with that. To do them properly and humbly, it's only about you subduing your own neuroses in order to be of benefit to others. So they're really powerful to have the Bodhisattva vows. And these vows go from life to life. Like we said yesterday, as Alex Berzin says in his commentaries, a vow is the subtle, they even say in the teaching, a subtle kind of energy that's visible to clairvoyance. And it's a way of molding your behavior. Vows are all about behavior. Vows are about body and speech, harnessing, molding, controlling, shaping your behavior. So just like I said before, when you're driving a car, you learn to not, you remember, I mustn't do this, I mustn't do that. You've got 1,000 vows. You don't think of it as a vow, but you vow not to do this and not to do that. And what are you doing? You're forming yourself into a good driver. Well, here we're forming ourselves into an amazing, ethical, beneficial being. How marvelous. So instead of the instinctive thing we have is, oh, so many vows, I can't take all those vows. Oh, I can't be a tennis player. There's too many things I can't do. Oh, I can't drive a car. I've got to say I can't do this and can't do that. Oh, I don't want to say that. We're like infants, We don't understand the logic of it. Psychological logic. And then, of course, remembering the point about the power of vows is such, as we discussed yesterday, that 24 hours a day that you have them in your mind stream, 24 hours a day you have them in your mind stream, you're putting atomic bombs under the habits that you're vowing not to do, and you're purifying your mind. And they're working 24 hours a day. You can't get ahead without vows. It's logical. You can't begin. It's logical. You can't drive a car if you don't know what you're supposed not to do. It's logical, but we hear it as religious. Oh, I can't do that. Someone's squashing me. It's not like that. It's wise advice. So the first level, just don't do it. And who's the beneficiary? You. You're the direct beneficiary. The indirect beneficiary is as Lama Zopa says, is the rats and the roaches. They're going to have a party because you leave them in peace. This next lot are more expensive. You still benefit because you're living in the vows, but now you're more skillful and wise and knowing more how to help others. You're breaking down the barrier between self and other that delusions have constructed, these artificial barriers. And as His Holiness said yesterday, the key element, the key thing you're trying to do, the essence of the entire Bodhisattva path, in terms of subduing the problems called self-cherishing. In the first level of practice, the wisdom wing, the main problem is called attachment, which is this emotional hunger to get what I want. This one is a consequence of attachment, and it's putting I first. We don't like hearing this. It sounds very cruel. They call it self-cherishing, which sounds like a nice term. We call it selfishness. We don't mind saying I've got attachment. We don't like to think I'm selfish. That's embarrassing to us. But that's what self-cherishing is. And selfishness, naturally because of attachment, we put first I, because we're having a panic attack. I's got to get what it wants. Right now with attachment, we see the entire world through the lenses of my needs. Here, we're shifting it to see the world through the lenses of others' needs, lessening this sense of neurotic little I. It's intense. It's profound. We go one step at a time. So the first prerequisite in order to enter into the Vajrayana, renunciation, which is the first stage of the practice. Now the second one is bodhicitta. So at least have an appreciation. You can't, it's not, a prerequisite is not to have bodhicitta actually, or to have renunciation actually. You have to have at least appreciation for it, and an understanding of what it is, and a genuine, sincere practicing of it. And the third, of course, is appreciation of emptiness, understanding wisdom, the three principal aspects of the path: renunciation, bodhicitta, emptiness. So without understanding emptiness, none of this makes any sense. None of this makes any sense, because the essential point, and this is already indicated by saying that the motivation for what you do is the main factor that determines the character of what you do, which is the key thing about all the teachings, but especially is emphasized in the Bodhisattva path. Meaning nothing has an intrinsic nature. Nothing has, as His Holiness said, things appear, but at the same time, they have no intrinsic nature. And these don't deny each other, they reinforce each other. This is what we have to learn to understand. So when we hear in terms of the two truths, as His Holiness said, in terms of the two truths, you've got the way things exist finally, and the shorthand for that is they are empty of independent existence. Then we have conventional truth. Things exist interdependently. Each implies the other, but we see them as opposite right now. So when we hear emptiness, we hear nothingness, and we fall into the abyss of the great mistake, as Tsongkhapa says. And then we hear that some things conventionally do exist, and we over-exaggerate it and grasp at it. Thank God there is something after all, grasp. These are both misconceptions. These are the wrong views. We go between like drunken sailors. When we're on the right track, when we hear empty, we hear dependent arising. When we hear dependent arising, we hear empty. We're moving towards the middle way. Middle way finally is when you're a Buddha and you cognize simultaneously conventional and ultimate. You cognize the two truths, whether it's a Vajrayana way of saying it or the Sutrayana way of saying it. That's finally the real middle way. So without renunciation, so Vajrayana, okay, what's Vajrayana and why are these the three prerequisites? I mean, there are levels of Vajrayana, as His Holiness said, different levels of practices too. So this is, generally speaking, 4 levels of practices. In one is called, the first one, I think this is this one, this practice of 1,000-arm Chenrezig, is Kriya Action Tantra, they call it. There's other levels, and there's the one that we mostly hear about, like it's called Highest Yoga Tantra, such as Vajrayogini and Haruka Chakra Samvara and Hayagriva and Hevajra, Kala Chakra, Yamantaka. These practices that they are, when we take those, that's when we take the third set of vows, the Tantric vows. This level of Tantra, you don't take Tantric vows, but a prerequisite is to have the Bodhisattva vows. And a prerequisite of the Bodhisattva vows is the lay vows, which His Holiness gave us yesterday. There's levels and levels. So why are these three levels? Why are these 3 principal aspects of path a prerequisite? Because the Tantric level is the most advanced psychologically, the most sophisticated level of Buddha's teachings. Various ways of describing it. One way is, Lama Yeshe always, from the time he first met hippies, back in the late 60s, early 70s, he somehow intuited that we're super intelligent, we're very educated technologically, very clever minds. And because our world is so degenerate, so much attachment and so many things available, and just kind of we're drowning in delusions, drowning in the world of attachment, that we're more open to the possibility that we can transform energy, that things don't have an intrinsic nature, that you can utilize poison to turn it into medicine. This is concept of transforming something from one thing to another. So he taught very simple principles of Tantra to us. So one way of describing the levels of practice, if attachment is the main problem and the delusions that follow, then the very first level is at least don't follow them, control the servants of the delusions and don't harm others. Next level is get to the delusions themselves and try to calm them down and understand them. Next level, so attachment, in terms of attachment, just leave the cake on the plate. First level, leave your hand in your lap and the cake on the plate. First level of practice. If you're driven by attachment, your mind goes berserk. Next level, you've harnessed your body and speech now to a degree, and now you can begin to taste the cake without going completely berserk, because you understand attachment now. You're not totally in the thrall of it, you could say. You get to the Bodhisattva path, your compassion is so tremendous that it overrides your compassion. And you happily eat cake for the sake of others without going berserk. You say like that. And the most advanced level, you're actually able to consciously, proactively eat the cake in order to activate detachment, in order to activate the joy and bliss that is triggered by contact with an attachment object, because you're able to utilize this and transform it into the path to enlightenment. They're the words. Understanding them or not is another discussion. But it's a more sophisticated level of practice, and it therefore demands. In other words, they talk about the analogy of using weeds for using poison, like using, when they talk alchemists, or they talk about like people who can utilize poison for medicine, right? Well, who's the only person who can utilize poison for medicine is the person who knows what poison is and knows it deeply and sophisticatedly, and they know how to transform it. A person who doesn't understand poison will just die if they eat poison. So a person who doesn't understand attachment, by following attachment, they'll just destroy them. So you can try to understand what it is first. Control the servants of the attachment, leave the cake on the plate. Then control the attachment, then add bodhicitta, now realize understand emptiness and know there's no intrinsic nature, and you're capable enough to now to utilize all this energy. So Tantra, in one way, if you look at all the Buddhas, there are all these different Buddhas we see in Tantra, all the different, there's Buddha in the Sutra teachings, and that's Shakyamuni Buddha, the monk. That's it. Where is he? There he is. Looking like a nice holy person. Look at him. There he is. Control body, speech, and mind. Control your body, control your speech, and control your mind. That's the essence of the Sutra approach. Now you got the Bodhisattva one, and then you have the Tantric one. And there are all these other ones, thousands of them. And all they are manifestations, visual representations of different qualities of mind. So you've got, got a little kind of family tree here. Someone was mentioned yesterday. We've got Dharmakaya. We mentioned that when we did refuge. We've got relative, absolute Buddha and relative Buddha. So absolute Buddha, another word for it in Sanskrit is Dharmakaya. Someone has mentioned, we called it the truth body. They refer to the Kaya's body. This mind is the pure, unmanifest, all-knowing, all-seeing, all-compassionate, all-wise Buddha mind. That's the Dharmakaya. There it is, Buddha. Now, we can't access that. So these kind beings who've accomplished Buddhahood kindly manifest as in the Rupakaya. There are two bodies, the Rupakaya, form body. And there's two of those. One is Shakyamuni, the Sutra approach, and one is Vajradhara for our tradition in the Tantric approach. I remember when I first met Lama Yeshe, first met the teachings, and I went to Kopan, and I went straight to the publishing room and started typing the prayers, and we did Gestetner and Ronio and all those things. Remember Gestetner and Ronio? Old people remember those. Well, we did it was before photocopying, before other things. So you had a piece of wax, and you typed on it, and it went through, and it got inked, and then it went onto the paper. It was a way of duplicating. It was called a duplicator. So I was typing away, and I kept coming up with this name, Vajradhara, and I liked him. Then I kept coming up with this person called Dorji Chang. I liked him too, and I discovered he was the same person. I was so happy. One was Tantric, one was Tibetan. I just liked the name. I kept thinking, who is this Buddha, And I asked Lama, because Lama would pop in and check up on me every now and again while I was typing away, before I became a nun. And I said, Lama, who's Dorji Chang? And instead of giving this intellectual tantric blah blah, two bodies, blah blah, he said, he's the biggest Buddha, dear. I was so happy I liked the biggest Buddha. I felt so proud. I liked the biggest Buddha. I loved. So that's Vajradhara. He's the boss Buddha in Tantra. He's the tantric aspect. So that's the difference. So this is where there's an indication of this transformation level of Tantra. You see the Shakyamuni, controlled, subdued, disciplined. Tantra, these kind of wild dudes, look at them. 14 legs and 14 arms, and crazy ones and peaceful ones and happy ones and sexy ones and violent ones, all these different, and all it is psychology. There's Manjushri over there holding a sword that cuts through ignorance. There's Tara, this gorgeous naked green lady with delicious little breasts, or big breasts, better. And she's a manifestation of power and action. Every single one of them is simply a visual representation of a certain psychological quality that either you want to purify, you want to get rid of ignorance, you practice Manjushri, you get some wisdom. You want to stop being weak and miserable and self-piteous, you practice Tara. She's powerful, action, energy, get on with it. Good name, Tara. Your parents are very wise. Action, and she's action energy. Cut through the obstacles, get things done. That's action. You want compassion, you practice Chenrezig. You want to purify attachment, you practice Vajrayogini, this gorgeous, naked, red lady. She is the manifestation of the transformation of attachment. So Vajradhara then over this, so he's the man, he's the kind of the main one, and then under him are the 5 Buddha families, and each of those Buddhas is a manifestation of purified delusion. So, for example, Amitabha is the desire family, the attachment family. He's the manifestation of purified attachment. So Vajrayogini is in her family, Tara's in her family, Chenrezig is in her family. His family, sorry. There's all these different families, and it's just psychology, it's just groupings of qualities psychologically. That's all, manifesting in these different lovely looking ancient, strange looking ladies and gentlemen. So it's just brilliant psychology. And so one of the aspects which Lama tried to get us to understand in the hippies, is you people don't even know how to be happy. You know how to be miserable. So the whole idea in Tantra is, once you've subdued your body, speech, and mind, harnessed your crazy self-pity energy, harness the attachment and the anger, and harness your behavior, and don't harm others, you become more joyful. So you enhance that even more by having compassion, become even more joyful and more marvelous and more kind, and you enhance and you utilize this joy and compassion to the nth degree in the Vajrayana. It's a quick method for completely ridding the mind of all the delusions by utilizing these energies and turning them into the path. Now, without renunciation, without bodhicitta, and without emptiness, this is an insane concept. You can't understand it. So these are the 3 prerequisites. You know? Okay, that's preparation. Any questions? We'll do the Bodhisattva vows yet. Any questions about all that, people? Any questions? No. If there are, that's good. Any questions? It's just general presentation of the 3 prerequisites that, you know, we talk about getting your mind. So it really means understanding psychologically the point of these 3 levels, psychologically understanding them. We say that all the time in our culture because the Buddha didn't say the word psychologically. It's just a Greek word, right? We use it as a verb and a noun and an adjective. Would have framed things differently. That's all he's saying. He didn't speak Greek, for God's sake. So, okay, no questions, that's fine. So I think we'll go through then the ceremony. It's just based on the ceremony His Holiness gave. It'll take about 40 minutes, and then we'll do the initiation with His Holiness, okay, people? So you Americans better get ready for it. Want a quick nap? We'll have a break in a minute. You have a 20-minute nap at midnight for you people. Maybe no Americans are in there. Maybe they've all gone to bed. Who's here? Who's here? Lou's, oh yeah, Lou's always there. Lou's there 24 hours a day. Well, there's Kevin. Hello, Kevin. Happy to see you, Kevin. Very happy to see you.
I'm here.
Hope you had a good nap, everybody. Dawn is there. There's good. And Dawn is there. Dawn, you're there, honey.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, that's good. So I don't want to be nervous and go too quick because I'm worried about you Americans. That's up to you guys to decide, you know, so you can, whatever. So we'll just do it nicely. Try and do it nicely. What time is it? 2 o'clock. I think we have a quick 5-minute break. Now, we'll have a break now, then we'll do the 40 minutes. We'll have another quick break and then we'll do the empowerment. Okay, darlings, is that all right? Everyone happy? Good, so have a quick 5-7-minute break and then we'll do the Bodhisattva vows. 40 minutes, repeating His Holiness, and it's just reinforming for those of us who did yesterday, it's taking them again, renewing them, and for those of you who missed out yesterday, it's taking them for you. So Aaron, though, Aaron, have you taken the lay vows or not, Aaron?
I have not taken the lay vows.
So you're gonna miss out then, darling. So I'm not gonna take the lay. I'm not gonna do that. Well, I might just another time. You just do it as a blessing now, Aaron. I think it's okay. That's all right with you, and we'll do it again. Don't worry. Okay. All right, sweetie.
Of course.
And I know that Wolfgang has got the vows already. You got the lay vows, haven't you, Wolfgang? Yeah. Okay. So it'll be 7-minute break. All right. 7 minutes will do. Then we'll do the Bodhisattva vows. Then we'll do the empowerment. Okay, darlings. Thank you.